Welcome back after the break. You're watching Indus News and I'm Fiza Jamal presenting you our latest stories in detail. Iran says it has reactivated 20 nuclear centrifuges in its latest rollback of commitments to the 2015 nuclear deal. The centrifuges would boost Iran's production of enriched uranium. The chief of the Atomic Energy Organization, Behrouz Kamalvandi, says a chain of 164 advanced centrifuges will become operational by November. He says Iran has lifted the limitations on nuclear research and development adopted under the 2015 agreement. Kamalvandi says the measures have been taken in retaliation for the U.S. withdrawal from the pact, but he says Iran could reverse the decision if all parties fulfill their commitments to the deal. Indian media rights organizations say Narendra Modi's government is silencing journalists in occupied Kashmir as part of the lockdown it imposed on August the 5th. The report, based on interviews with 70 media professionals in Indian occupied Kashmir, says journalists are being subjected to harassment and arbitrary arrest. Media rights investigators observed intense surveillance and informal probes of journalists who published reports critical of the government. Meanwhile, Kashmiri activist Shehla Rashid has described sedition charges brought against her as frivolous and politically motivated. Delhi police booked Rashid yesterday for criticizing India's human rights violations in occupied Kashmir on social media. Prime Minister Imran Khan says Pakistan firmly stands with Kashmiris for their right to self-determination. Visiting the line of control, Khan said India is committing worst human rights violations by targeting civilians in Azad Kashmir and besieging occupied Kashmir. Chief of Army Staff General Qamar Javed Bajwa accompanied the Prime Minister. Khan said Pakistan is exposing fascist actions of Indian regime before the world. He said Pakistan's armed forces are fully prepared to respond to any Indian misadventure. The Prime Minister also met the families of the victims of cross-LOC firing and lauded their resilience against Indian atrocities. Malaysian Foreign Minister Saifuddin bin Abdullah has expressed concern for the human rights situation in occupied Kashmir. In a telephone call with Pakistan's Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi, Saifuddin said Malaysia supports the rights of Kashmiri people. He underscored the importance of peaceful resolution of disputes between India and Pakistan. Pakistan's Foreign Minister briefed Saifuddin about India's illegal actions in occupied Kashmir. Qureshi said the occupied valley is under continuous lockdown since August the 5th, which results in severe shortage of food and medicines. He said the Indian oppressive actions in occupied Kashmir have put regional peace at stake. India has failed in its attempt to become the first nation to explore the south pole of the moon. The Indian Space Research Organization says it lost contact with the Chandrayaan-2 spacecraft as it attempted a soft landing. It says communication with the lander was lost 2.1 kilometers from the moon's surface. ISRO Chief K. Sivan says data is being analyzed to find out what went wrong. Chandrayaan-2 took off on July the 22nd to probe the unexplored lunar's south pole. The south pole is believed to contain some water because its craters are suspected of being unexposed to high temperatures. Only the US, Russia and China have successfully attempted moon landings. In the United Kingdom, the House of Lords has approved the bill seeking to block a no-deal Brexit at the end of October. The bill requires Prime Minister Boris Johnson to ask for a 3-month delay to Britain's departure from the European Union. The House approved the bill without a formal vote in its final stage. Prime Minister Johnson called the legislation a surrender bill. Johnson says he will not ask the EU for any extension anymore. Israeli forces have shot dead 2 Palestinians during weekly protests on the Gaza border. 80 other protesters were injured. Israeli soldiers shot 2 teenage victims in the neck and stomach. Israeli forces have killed over 300 Palestinians and injured 18,000 others since the weekly protests began in March last year. A court has sentenced the head of Turkey's main opposition party in Istanbul to 9 years and 8 months in prison over social media posts. Kenan Kaftancioglu is accused of insulting President Recep Tayyip Erdogan and spreading terrorist propaganda. Kaftancioglu is the head of the Istanbul branch of the Secular Republican People's Party. She played a key role in the shock defeat of Erdogan's handpicked mayoral candidate for Istanbul earlier this year. She said her trial is intended to punish the people. Kaftancioglu said the verdict will not silence her. In Hong Kong, hundreds of anti-government protesters have gathered outside a subway station in the Kowloon Peninsula. They are demanding an investigation into police violence during months of pro-democracy protests. Police fired rubber bullets and used tear gas to disperse the demonstrators. The protests started in June against an anti-extradition bill, but have turned into a call for democratic reforms. Hong Kong leader Carrie Lam withdrew the bill, but protesters pledged to fight on, calling Lam's concessions too little and too late. Hurricane Durian has made landfall on the Outer Banks of North Carolina after hitting the islands with powerful winds and battering waves. Meanwhile, the death toll from the hurricane has climbed to 43 in the northern Bahamas Abaco Islands. Since leaving the Bahamas, the slow-moving storm has now gained strength off the eastern U.S. seaboard. The National Hurricane Center said the storm made landfall at Cape Hatteras with maximum winds of 150 kilometers per hour. Durian is currently battering the Carolinas, where coastal towns have been flooded. The hurricane has also whipped up tornadoes and cut power to hundreds of thousands of people. Hundreds of people are trapped amid rising floodwater as well. The leaders of 7 countries home to vast Amazon have signed a pact to protect the world's largest tropical rainforest. The presidents of Bolivia, Ecuador and Peru attended the one-day summit hosted by Colombia's president in the city, Leticia. Find out why in this report.
Forest fires in the Amazon have surged this year, destroying vast swathes of a vital bulwark against global climate change. The highest number of forest fires since 2010 are tearing through the Amazon, which is home to 1 million people. Critics have blamed Brazilian President Bolsonaro's policy of opening up more of the forest to agriculture and mining for the damage. Colombian President Ivan Duque has called on the region's leaders to work together to combat deforestation.
Here we are signing the agreement. An agreement where we coordinate and work harmoniously for common goals. A pact which obliges us, commits us, and motivates us to protect our Amazon.
The presidents were joined by indigenous leaders whose communities are the hardest hit by the Amazon forest fires. Ecuador's President Lenin Moreno said it's time to take action without further delay.
Little remains for words. From this signature, we are going to fundamentally take actions because no theory is valid as long as it does not acquire earthiness and above all favors those who are most in need.
The 7 nations have agreed to put more time into education and to increase the role of the Amazon's indigenous communities.
In Spain, firefighters are battling wildfires in the northwestern region of Galicia. Authorities have evacuated hundreds of people from villages after the blaze closed motorways. The wildfires have also destroyed over 500 hectares of forest. In 2017, 4 people were killed in forest fires in province. A group of U.S. states has launched an antitrust investigation into Facebook on suspicion of stifling competition and putting users at risk. New York State Attorney General Letitia James announced the action on behalf of 7 other states and the District of Columbia. The probe will determine whether Facebook endangered consumer data, reduced the quality of their choices, or increased the price of advertising. The Attorney Generals of Colorado, Florida, Iowa, Nebraska, North Carolina, Ohio, and Tennessee will join New York in the probe. The social media giant is already facing increasing antitrust scrutiny from the U.S. Congress and federal agencies. Texas, on behalf of 40 other states, has also launched a similar investigation against high-tech companies like Google. In Belgium, the country's love of pigeon racing has brought fame to breeder and trainer Joel Verschoot. His star bird, Armando, has made headlines for being the fastest international racer. Armando is a highly sought-after bird following his recent win at the recent Racing Birds Champion Leagues in Europe. You can meet Armando in this report. And we will show you this report later on. I'll continue with the next story. Joni Mitchell sang about paving paradise for a parking lot, and a Swiss artist has set up a forest in a football stadium. This suggests that one day nature might only be enjoyed in a zoo-like environment. Find out here.
An artificial forest setup of around 300 trees in Klagenfurt Stadium in southern Austria is part of a climate change campaign. During the past century, human activities have released large amounts of carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. The tree exhibition will be held to encourage more tree planting and highlight the risks posed by global warming.
For some, this will be of a highly symbolic character or of a philosophical character, like the tree of life or the place of longing. Because of the current situation, this represents a memorial as a part of the climate change discussion.
While climate change has recently become a pressing political issue in much of the world, the idea for the exhibition is not new. It was first drawn by Austrian artist Max Pentner almost 30 years ago, and the image is shown in the stadium.
It goes back to the drawing which we project here by Max Pentner, who in 1970 had the vision that one day that what we have been doing for decades at zoos with endangered animals could happen to nature.
Littman also said if everybody can take a stand and try to end global warming, this world would be a safer place to live in. The exhibition will run till October 27th and it opens on Monday, 8th of September.
Well, your job's a joke, you're broke, and your love life's DOA. Yes, it's no secret that Friends was one of the best TV shows to grace our screens. The age-old and timeless comedy series celebrates its 25th anniversary with a pop-up in New York City. Fans can now visit the pop-up replicas of the neighborhood coffee shop and other sets from the show. See everything in this report.
Friends' official theme music sings, "Your job's a joke, you are broke," and it still adds an element of poignancy 25 years on. To honor the silver anniversary of the series premiere, an immersive pop-up experience debuts in New York City. Fans will get to relive a few of the show's most iconic episodes.
We were on a break! Oh my God, if you say that one more time, I'm gonna break up with you.
Ross, take the Emily. Take the Rachel.
The pop-up is filled with Friends memorabilia like Monica's purple door and Joy and Chandler's football table and Barca Lounger recliners. The show premiered on the US television network NBC on September the 22nd, 1994.
I believe it is timeless. The stories, the characters themselves, we can all relate. Any generation can relate to the situations that they were in. Maybe not as comedic as they were.
People's lives in the early 20s has been depicted in the theme song, as it said, "No one told you life was gonna be this way."
It's a mystical quality that this show has, that it has endured for so many generations, that it appeals to people of all ages, that younger generations whose experience of daily life is very different from the one that the characters in Friends have.
The Friends pop-up will remain open throughout the month till October the 6th.
And in its 44-year history, the Toronto International Film Festival has kicked off with the Canadian documentary for the first time. The film, called Once Were Brothers, Robbie Robertson and the Band, is about influential rockers, The Band. Find out the details here.
Glitz and glam and storytelling have converged in Toronto for the annual film festival. The event opened on a decidedly Canadian note this year. 10 days of movies kicked off with Once Were Brothers, Robbie Robertson and the Band. It tells the story of the Canadian songwriter and guitarist. He battled alcoholism, heroin addiction, and personal conflicts throughout his career. The film, in its thought-provoking authenticity, dives deeper into a brilliant mind.
I think what I learned and spent a lot of time focusing on while I was making this film is just this idea that, life is what you make of it. You don't go out and discover who you are, you sort of invent who you are, and that's what Robbie Robertson's life and experience really speaks to.
The skill and precision with which the director has treated the story has been greatly applauded.
I didn't have the most prestigious CV, but what I did have was this passion for the material. Like I wanted to do this more than anything else, and I think that's very compelling for people.
The documentary is one of the 245 films being shown in Toronto, many of which have already generated Oscar buzz.
Now on to the world of business, where Japan has rejected South Korea's offer to extend a military intelligence sharing pact in exchange for the easing of Japanese trade controls. Officials in Tokyo said the government would not condone bartering trade controls for security cooperation. The 2016 intelligence sharing accord is set to expire in November after South Korea withdrew last month. Seoul pulled out after Tokyo imposed controls on its exports of materials used to manufacture semiconductors and display panels. China's tech giant Huawei has launched world's first 5G chipset at a trade show in Berlin. The Kirin 990 is the smallest 5G mobile phone chip with lower power consumption. Vice President Ai Wei says Huawei has worked on the chip for the last 2 years. The VP says the chip integrates a number of new technological innovations, so the total number of transistors exceeds 10 billion. Huawei's flagship phone equipped with the Kirin 990 series will be released later this month. White House advisor Larry Kudlow says talks between the U.S. and Chinese trade officials could heat up during meetings in October, but he said that he could not predict the outcome of the talks. Precise dates for the October negotiations have not been set yet. Earlier this week, China's Commerce Ministry said trade talks between the two countries would take place in early October in Washington. It also said trade teams from the two countries will hold consultations in mid-September before the October talks. American mobile phone chip maker Qualcomm says it will bring 5G mobile phones with a high-end modem to the market. The company said its chips will also power mid-price devices hitting the shelves next year. The 5 devices from Samsung Electronics employ 5th-generation chipsets from Qualcomm. Samsung has also put Qualcomm chips in its lower-priced 5G models. Taiwan-based MediaTek has also announced a 5G smartphone chip this year. China's Huawei Technologies unveiled its 5G chipset at the IFA Consumer Electronics Fair in Berlin. Over 20 network operators and as many smartphone makers from the United States to China are launching 5G services and handsets. As I battle out with the heat for the last time in Lahore, let's see what the weather is looking like today around the globe. Well, these are all the stories in detail I have for you this hour, so I'll see you on this side or the other. But for further updates, stay tuned on Indus News.